Was that the one? All right, who was it? Outerz0ne 2. Yeah? And Raymond's asleep right now, isn't he? Hi, Raymond. And who is it? Outerz0ne 1. Do what? Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you were there.
Here, take strictures, buddy. There you go. I have other stuff coming. Here, somebody take an egg. Psych. No. You good to go? Excellent. So, I have, who wants a t-shirt? Who can fit into an XL? So, No Starch actually sent us 23 pounds worth of books, which is no great shakes. It's a fair number of them. I have, out of their new line, the Manga Guide to Statistics. Yeah, I can't speak today. The Manga Guide to Statistics. And that book goes to whoever can fill in the blank. You have to figure out what language it is and what goes in the blank. First person to raise their hand and answer correctly. Hey, it's because you're blind, oldie. Who? You got it? There you go. Can you hand that to him? Thank you, sir. You win the Manga Guide to Statistics. That's it. Guess what? If you don't mind, any of the books that we give out from No Starch this weekend, if you read it and you like it, go on Amazon and actually do a review, because that's how they get a lot of their referrals and things like that. So at one point in time, I got to read some of the new stuff before it actually hit the shelves and comment on it. So it's kind of, a way we can pay them back and say thank you. So, Adrian, you're a scholar and a gentleman. Thank you for taking an early slot. Adrian's going to do a talk on turning the Zipit Z2 into a mobile hacking device. When did I ask you if you would do a talk?
You never actually really did.
Hey, man, would you do a talk at Outerz0ne?
Oh, sure.
Cool.
I saw do too.
Do what?
I do too.
Well, you can do a Bob talk. Who knows what a Bob talk is? Shut up. You're dementia. Shut up and sit down, old man. So, who's seen the TED Talks? All right? TED Talks. To have the live streamed web version of that, to actually get that is like 30 grand or something. You have to pay some unbelievable figure to be able to watch it as it takes place from your web browser. I really like the TED Talks, but it kind of pisses me off that the average human being will never actually sit in the audience of that those presentations. So we decided we'd do some short 10-minute talks called the Bob Talks. Actually, it's builder break, so we can't be accused of just using a funny name that's 3 letters and is very common. So anyway, Adrian will also be doing a Bob Talk. They're real rapid-fire, 10-minute talks. We've got 4 or 5 of them lined up that I'll be halfway interesting. And then there's mine, which will be boring as shit. So he'll be doing that a little bit later on. There's some other contests and stuff. If you wander back around the lunchtime and check out the registration area, which is down the hallway to your left, off from the lobby. And I think I'll get the hell out of the way. Adrian, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I whipped these slides up on mostly, I think it was Monday or Tuesday when I made the Twitter and said, Ziploc said that the schedule was posted. So I went out and looked at the schedule and like, well, damn, I'm on it. I need to move this a little closer to me, don't I? All right. My first presentation today is on turning the Zipit Z2 into a mobile hacking device. For those that don't know what a Zipit Z2 is, I'll show it to you here in a second. All right, first of all, a little bit about me. My name is Adrian Crenshaw. I run a website, Irongeek.com. Anybody ever visited? Cool beans. Thank you much. I have an interest in InfoSec education. My main thing is I like to teach other people things and learn things from others. And I'm just a geek with extra time on my hands. I don't know everything. I may get something wrong. If I do, feel free to tell me. All right. First of all, what is a Zipit Z2? And I'm going to try to pull this out gently and not disturb all the stuff I have here. This is a Zipit Z2. I remember seeing the original version of Zipit a while back when it had black and white screen. But a couple months back, I saw people on Hack5 got the newer version out. And I decided to start playing with it. Essentially, it's a $50 mobile computer meant for IM messages. You give it to your teenager and they chat back and forth. But at $50, you get a fair amount of stuff. You have a QWERTY keyboard. You have an X-Scale processor on it running at 312 megahertz, 32 megabytes of RAM built in, 8 megs of flash where you can hold the kernel and a couple other things, 802.11g support, a 2.8-inch 320 by 240 screen. It accepts a mini SD card, and this is how we can mainly expand it. And since it takes a 5-volt power, you could, in theory, modify it to accept power off of a USB port, which is going to come in important later when I start talking about drop boxes. I currently have an 8. I don't know if it'll get bigger or not. I don't know any reason why it won't, but 8 is as big as I bought. Alright, first of all, the basics of getting an OS set up in it. I mean, by default, it comes with a rather limited OS that's meant for IMing. So, what you have to do is go out and get a kernel image and its auto flasher script, and essentially put all this stuff in the mini SD card and boot from it. What that's going to do is it's going to overwrite part of that 8 megs I mentioned before and put the kernel and some other loading tools there. Now, before you had to go to several different places to pick up the stuff, I put one big zip file out there on my website that people can, or a link to off my website that you can just download and get all this stuff. After you have the kernel and so forth on the device's 8 megs of storage, you can use the mini SD card to put the rest of the user land stuff, so all the actual applications you're going to run. On my user land that I created, I went ahead and used root nexuses as a basis and did a few changes. I also used Outerz0ne 27's kernel. Someone was asking me what I'm using for cross-compilation. You can do that, but currently I'm just using precompiled binaries that other people put together, and I've tried to find the best of this and that and put it all in one place. A few changes I did to root nexuses. I edited the init tab so that root automatically logs in. I'm meaning Sidetrack is the project I'm working on here, which is basically a little distribution for the Zipit for security tools. And generally most of these things are going to require root access anyway, so I have it automatically log in as root. The password is Tor. Of course, you'll want to change this after you do your install. Also, I disabled Telnet and FTP off of his, and they're still there. You can turn them back on. And I've installed OpenSSH as an alternative. So you can SSH into it or SFTP files to and from it. I've updated the Wi-Fi scan script to work with SIDs that have spaces in them. The ones that Root Nexus provided on his, if you had a space in the SID, it wouldn't work. Also, I modified the Wi-Fi scan script to actually work so you can see what access points are in your area. Then I went in and essentially, once you have one of these user lands on your Zipit, essentially they're just a Debian install. So you can apt-get anything that the Debian ARM branch has out there. So I went out there and got a whole bunch of packages we'll list here in a second. Oh, another change I made to my user land is I have it automatically connect to the last access point or try to connect to the last access point you connect to. There's various reasons why this is probably a bad idea, and it does slow up the process, especially if that access point's not in the area, so in future versions I may take that out. I also updated the wireless firmware on his user land so that it has a little bit better support for doing promiscuous mode. In the past, if I did promiscuous mode, it would automatically no longer be able to send packets. I can now send packets. I still can't do monitor mode or injection. Hopefully that might be something in the future. If anybody has good device driver development skills, let me know. I'd be interested in seeing if someone can actually develop injection and monitor mode. But we now at least got things working where you can do promiscuous and ARP poisoning, though there are also limitations because of the slow processor in this particular system. Also, my image for putting on the SD card is 2 gigabytes. I don't use all that 2 gigabytes, but I figure most people, if they're willing to spend $50 on a Zipit, they're willing to spend an extra $10 on a 2 gig card. And of course, I added all the following packages, which is a fairly extensive list. You know, your normal usual suspects, Nmap, EtherCap, dsniff, stuff like that. I've yet to install Metasploit, and here's the reason why. As my understanding, Metasploit runs dog slow on an iPhone, which is has far more capacity than the Zipit does. So I'm dreading how slow it's going to run. And I have other uses for the Zipit where I could be running Metasploit on a full-blown PC and just using the Zipit as a proxy for me, which I want to talk a little bit more about in a little bit. Alright, basic steps to customize the Zipit. It's not too difficult, but I figured I'd put all my instructions in one place because I had to. Hack5 has some good instructions, but I wanted to make it very step by step and have all the files in one place because I hate when people have to go out and say, all right, grab your kernel image from here, grab your kernel installing scripts from here, grab your user land from here. So I put everything in this one location. If you go out to that particular link, and I can get you my slides whenever you want them, they'll be up on the website later. I actually have, or just do a Google search for Sidetrack Linux, or Sidetrack Zipit. And when you download that, it'll have my user LAN and all the auto flasher scripts and the kernel and everything. So what you do is you grab that zip file, and then you unzip it. And what you're going to have in there, first of all, is an image file. This is what you're going to write to your SD card, and a little folder called First SD. Copy everything in First SD to a root of an SD card. I've been told it has to be formatted FAT16, though I seem to recall FAT32 also working. Alright. Once you've copied all that stuff onto the SD card, you should be able to just boot from it. And in short order, it should install the kernels to that 8 megs of space I was talking about before. After you do that, you actually have to write your user LAN image. And this is where things get a little bit simpler now. I was looking at Hack5's instructions for this, and the tool they were using was a German tool called, I think it's German, called FizzDiskWrite, but I don't speak German. I looked around, and essentially the image they were using was just a DD image. So anything that accepts a DD image will work. I'm using the Win32 disk imager from the Ubuntu project, and it works awesome, and it's in English, and if you're an English speaker, you just choose that image file, choose the disk you want to write to, in this case, whatever your SD card got mapped to on your Windows box, and write it. If you're doing this in Linux, just use the DD command. After you write the image, now notice I said I have a 2 gigabyte image. Well, a lot of people want an SD cards bigger than that. So how do you resize it? There's a couple ways you could go about doing that. I suppose I could have zipped up everything in one big tar file and had you unzip it, but I decided to go this route instead. I give you that image, so you just write to the SD card. Then after you're done with that, you can just load it, take that SD card to a Linux box. Use anybody ever use gparted? Yeah, just use gparted and then resize the partition out to the rest of the SD card. And now you have 8 gigs of storage, or at least in my case, to put all these different tools from the Debian ARM branch. And that's a lot of possibilities. Now, not all those possibilities are going to work well for you because, as I said before, the Zipit is kind of limited on resources. But it's also $50. All right. A little bit of a physical demo of what this thing looks like. Let me see if I can get this up. Bastards. Apparently that only runs for so long. That must be the limitation. That's okay. I can deal with it. I just have to get this tool back up. Alright. Now the issue is going to become actually getting it to where you all can see this. This is the Zipit Z2 actually booted. And focusing is a huge problem here. Let me move this out. I'm actually going to show the physical parts of it. Essentially, you have a little headphone jack on this side, a little reset switch. This is where your mini SD card goes in. Is go get motion sickness out there, ain't you? Right there. It's actually a port on the back, and if you go out to, I think it's a Zipit, I think it's linux.zipitwireless.com, you can actually find the pinout for this port. Now, whether or not the kernel support it yet, I'm not sure, but you actually have pinouts for like USB host support and stuff like that. By the way, if anybody's wondering what that little square port is, one of the developers I contacted said it was that little square port is there as a microphone jack. Though what kind of connector you have to plug it into, I'm really not sure. Alright, let me see if I can get just the right distance. So you can see, we can get around a few simple keystrokes. You don't have a touch screen on this thing. So you have to get around by hitting the Option key and then using the cursors. And what that should allow you to do is move your cursor around. Got a little menu system here, which, if I can get it just the right distance so my camera will autofocus and do its job. unfortunately, this is highly depending on what your lighting situation is. Let me do one quick change. And see if I can actually get this. Okay, that's fine. Options, video capture filter, device settings. Alright. Well, it's getting a bit more legible there. You know what? I think I'm going to be happy with that. Was that?
The other camera right here is running to the light.
Okay, what do you mean? Okay, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm using a webcam. Okay, I'm sorry. Alright, so now I have my menu up. I can just go through the menu, and I've installed a bunch of stuff. I removed some of the games that Root Nexus had on his, but I bet his version actually had Quake on it and everything, which was pretty cool. And actually, it seemed to run Quake okay. I can bring up the little wireless menu. Hopefully. This little stop button is what actually ends up being. There we go. Stop button ends up being what you have to actually left click, and the button in the middle is the right click, which I think is a little counterintuitive. Here's all your different options. I'm not going to actually try to connect to anything, but let's go ahead and do just a real quick scan. I have to hit options again so I can type on the keyboard normally. Like I said, this device has its limitations because of its nature. I have to hit Alt F5. By the way, there's all sorts of weird keystrokes you actually have to make to get the thing to work properly. And I have those on my site. Yes? That better? Alright, sorry about that. Let's go ahead and do a quick scan of what's in our area. And you're not seeing what that says yet. Once I get it the right autofocus to work, it should say something along the lines of full scan or quick scan. I'm just going to do a quick scan. Alt 1. Man, I think I would be better without the autofocus even turned on. There we go. That's a little better. You know what? It comes in and then it goes right out. Alright, let's see if we can just... There we go. Alright. There's a list of the access points in the area. The funny thing is I have to hold it in my hand to get it to work. I know. Well, I can't operate it, and I can't operate the device and hold the camera at the same time. Alright. But that's the basics of getting around in that. And I have tons of tools on it. Like I said, EtherCap, Nmap. I'm not going to bother to actually show you that because it works the same way as it would for any Linux command line. So let me go ahead and exit back out of this and tab over to my slides again. Let's see. Alright. Alright. Now a little bit about getting around the interface. As you saw earlier, I had to hit the options button to actually make the D-pad act as a mouse. The smiley button is the tab. Auto-completion is really an important thing, especially on such a small keyboard device. Also, the little smiley face is an escape key. There's a bunch of quick keys for like taking things full screen, non-full screen, you know, preview window, or previous window, close it, show you the desktop, and so forth. If you want a complete layout of how the keyboard works, go out to this bigredswitch.confu.com and they have something that will help you out if you decide to buy a Zipit. Now, I have all these tools on there, and I can run those, and it's kind of fun to go to a coffee shop. Not that I would do this kind of thing. Bob might. And play around. But one of the ideas I had for the Zipit was using it as a El Cheapo Dropbox. Essentially, alright, how many people here manage firewalls? or have a network behind a NAT box. Generally speaking, what's weaker, ingress filtering or egress filtering? Egress filtering is generally a lot weaker. So if you had a box on the inside of a network that remoted back out to you, that would be a lot easier. Now you could get a more expensive system, and the technique I'm about to show would be the same on any little Linux-based system. But the thing about the Zipit is it's $50. It has all these little capabilities, and if you're a pen tester and you don't mind leaving it behind, I mean, it's cheap enough to where you don't necessarily worry about it. Other people do this kind of thing with iPhones and so forth, and you got a bigger budget. An iPhone is probably, in some ways, a better option, but I'm going to show you a little bit about doing it with Zipit. But essentially, since the sidetrack, in this case, let's say the pen tester went in, left it on the target network, and had it set to automatically remote back out to him. Even if it's behind a NAT box, because it's behind the firewall, it can connect straight on out. And if it's a firewall there, depending on what ports they're filtering, generally they're going to not filter stuff coming from the inside as much as stuff coming in from the outside. So you could maybe set, I haven't currently set just use port, standard SSH port 22, but there's no reason why you couldn't, muck that around and change it to something different. Alright, so basically what we have is Zipit on the target network connected up. Another reason I like to get those back ports to work is if I can figure out how to get regular Ethernet to work, that would probably be even better. Also, if you need to find a power source, you could modify a USB plug for it because it takes 5 volts in and USB is 5 volts, so as long as it doesn't draw too much current, it's all good. Bob's your uncle. What was that? If you can get in there, yes, but then you're talking about putting it inside of a box, which is mostly metal, or maybe mostly metal, in which case you might have some signal problems if you're using Wi-Fi. Okay. But I'm just saying, there's ways of getting 5 volts and still hide this thing someplace. Alright, the first step, well, there's 7 ways you can shovel a shell back out of a Linux system, or any Unix-like operating system, or Windows for that matter. This netcat command, essentially, on the PC I would do a NCAT. I'm using NCAT. That's Fyodor's Nmap version of netcat. Just setting up a listening port 74 on my PC, and then from inside of the natted off network, I can use NCAT and connect back to my machine. Now, in this case, I'm using an internal IP address. It doesn't have to be an internal IP address. That IP address is whatever the IP address of my home machine is. What port to connect on, and what executable to throw into that particular shell and throw it back out. And then after I do this, that NCAT session will be able to type commands back and forth. Now, that's a way of doing it, and you can actually, with newer versions of netcat and NCAT, depending on the version you have, you can add encryption and all that to it. But there's a little bit more difficult but more elegant way once you actually have it functioning. With the Zipit Z2, you can install OpenSSH. That opens up a lot more possibilities. For instance, here's a set of commands for doing, who's ever done SSH reverse SSH tunnel? Essentially, you have it establish a connection back out to you. Once again, since it's going through egress, generally firewall rules are going to be somewhat weaker. So on the Zipit itself, you could run this command, and what it's basically saying is set up on the local host port, localhost port 1974, tunnel everything, throw it out to Outerz0ne. It has to use an account on the remote PC, some PC client, which would be my home machine. And then on the PC at my home, I would simply do an SSH dynamic port forwarding 1080. I throw that on there so I can use it as a proxy. Anything that will proxy via SOCKS should work fine. Then I tell it to connect to port local 1974 as root localhost. This root localhost password is actually the root password for the Zipit. And then all of a sudden it's connected. And so I have a reverse tunnel back out that I can actually use any kind of SOCKS-based tool. So I could possibly use Metasploit and use a SOCKS proxy to actually be able to do my connection. So I don't run Metasploit on Zipit, I just use the Zipit as a pivot. Which is a little bit better solution because of, the slowness of you might encounter with trying to get Metasploit to work on the Zipit directly. Now, I was looking around for a more automated way of doing this, and Brian Hutchinson posted some scripts that would automatically try to shell out every 5 minutes. That way you can leave the Zipit behind, and you don't have to constantly wait for a connection or worry about the connection going down, because it'll hopefully come back up 5 minutes later if you happen to have some kind of network glitch. So the following slides are based on Brandon's notes with a few modifications. First of all, to actually get this part to work, you have to do you have to generate keys and use key authentication to actually be able to get the SSH to work properly. So the first thing I do is generate a key on the Zipit, and you can do that with the SSH Keys-T RSA. I use a blank passphrase because I don't want to ask for anything, because I want it to be automated. Then I'm simply using the cat command, and I'm connecting back out to my home machine, Irongeek.com, and putting those authorized keys on my home machine so they can make the connection. Then there's a script I'll be showing here in a bit. I essentially just call it Autossh, change mod it so it can execute. And this is the script in question. Essentially what you see is I just set what machine I'm going to connect to. And it might be a little too small for you to see, but it'll be on the video. And what username to connect to on my home machine, remote port, so on and so forth. And here's the command. And essentially this is based on Brandon Hutchinson's script. And it just keeps iterating through if it loses the connection and tries to reestablish the connection. So you just drop the Zipit off at a facility and have it remote back out to you. After you have that script created, you use cron tab, which is also something I've added onto my Zipit user land, so you can schedule this job to run every 5 minutes. And you use that, do that after you enter cron tab -E, just use that input line, and every 5 minutes, it should try to connect back out to you. Now at this point, you just have to go to your PC anytime you want to, and there hopefully should be a shell waiting for you. Just enter that SSH command that you see right here. It'll set up a SOCKS port on 1080 on your local machine you can use for any tool that can use SOCKS, and you can just use the Zipit as a pivot. Now there's a few more things I want to try in the future. I actually do want to try to get Metasploit running on the thing just for, you know, shits and giggles, but I'm not thinking it's going to have the mustard to actually pull that off. I also want to mess around more with sniffing and so forth. I've got promiscuous mode working, I've got ARP poisoning apparently working, but when you start using the Zipit Z2 to man the middle, it seems to bog the CPU down so much that it just kind of stops passing packets, so it has some limitations. Also, if you go out to the development website, there's actually a pinout for that port on the back I showed you. Apparently these are the cables, the connectors and cables in question, and you can't order them from like DigiKey. So I'd like to actually mess around and see what you can actually do as far as adding hardware. It'd be nice to actually add like a USB Ethernet card in the back of this, because that allows you even more options, because then you don't have to connect to the wireless. You can actually just find an open jack and plug it in. Here are a few links that are useful for more information. First of all, my link, which is once again too small to read, but it'll be on the slides eventually, or if anybody needs the slides, just come ask me for it. Well, I have my sidetrack distribution and all the instructions. Like I said, I base sidetrack on Root Nexus's user land, which is at zipit.rootnexus.org. The Hack 5 people are the ones that turned me onto it, and they have a few segments on messing around with the Zipit. Also, if you want to see a good blog on all sorts of cool things people have been doing with the Zipit, Hunter Davis runs a blog that a section of it is on Zipit hacking. Alioso, the person I got my kernel from, has his own website and his own user land you can check out. QuantumLime.com has a cool Zipit page with all sorts of extra information where I pulled some of the information about how to use the keyboard and get it to work right. And finally, linux.zipitwireless.com, where you can download more information, more specs on the system, find that pinout I was mentioning for the back port, and so forth. Before I get off stage, there's a few little events I'd like to mention. First of all, the ISSA Kentucky meetings. If anybody lives in the Louisville, Kentucky area, we have a monthly meeting where they buy you lunch and they have someone come up and speak on some security topic. Sometimes it's more vendor related, sometimes it's some really cool technical details. Things vary, but it's still a good organization to be at. Louisville InfoSec, which is our yearly conference up there. Also, the various conferences I go to, which include Freaknik, Nauticon, and Outerz0ne. Finally, any questions? Yes?
Frankly, I never heard of this machine until I read about your talk. Is this available in brick and mortars or
In theory, I've heard it's actually available in some brick-and-mortar Targets, but when I went by my Targets, I couldn't find it. But I ended up ordering it from Amazon.
And secondly, you know about the 802.11 chip?
It's not capable of injection. I'm trying to remember the name of the chipset because I knew I had to stumble across it because I had to download a newer version of the firmware. But no, it's not currently supporting injection, and I had to update to a newer firmware just to get promiscuous mode to work right without dropping connections.
Pretty much the same price everywhere?
Every place I've seen it's about $50. Yes. All right. This is another downside to it. Now, while it's hey, I'm just trying not to oversell the device. It's a cheap device to leave behind someplace to remote back out to you to get around firewalls. That's, I think, my main focus on this. I had left mine on for, I believe, 3 hours continuously, which isn't too bad. You know, Wi-Fi usage and so forth. The downside to it is when you turn it off, there's still some kind of trickle charge going on. Maybe to keep the batteries keeping the clock alive. I'm not sure, but it's enough that within like a day, you have no charge left. So that part kind of sucks. I mean, I have my N810 from Nokia, which is a lot more expensive device. The nice thing about it is I turn it off, and the battery seems to last forever. The Zipit, not so much. But about 3 hours of continuous on time is what I was experiencing.
Do you know if anybody has a USB monitor adapter yet?
Not that I know of. And in theory, I mean, currently there's no USB host support directly, at least not to my knowledge. Maybe if someone wired up the right thing to that back port, my understanding there is a USB out on there, it might be possible, but you'd probably also have to modify the kernel to support it. I just write the documentation. Hopefully I can find some other people that are better developers to actually make this a more flexible platform.
Capable of running comments?
Was that? Actually, you know, it did seem to run Quake decently. I mean, it wasn't too awful bad. I mean, let's see. How much more bet this thing's crashed again? See, I never left it on for longer periods of time, so I figured that wasn't a limitation it would have. But off the top of my head, no, I don't. But if anybody wants to play with the device, I'll be around the con. Just ask me, and I should have it on me or nearby me. Any other questions? Well, in that case, I'll let the next speaker set up, and hopefully I'll be back for the Bob Talks. I have what I think is a little bit cooler project than this to present on. I don't know if I can do it in 10 minutes' time, but I can at least probably cover the high points. Thank you for your time.
Technically, right now we have a break until 1 o'clock. We're going to do lunch, so everybody chat, eat, do whatever you want, and then at 1 o'clock our